Can a smart city function without an innovation ecosystem? What role does technology play? Can a smart city function without co-creating in a collaborative ecosystem? Well, to discuss this and more in the context of Smart Hamilton, we have with us Janat McBull, the Smart City Advisor to the Hamilton City Council. Thank you for your time, Janat.
Thank you.
Let's take a moment and get you to introduce yourself to our participants on the course.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm the Smart Cities Council Australia New Zealand Director for New Zealand. I'm also on the Executive Committee for NZ IoT Alliance, which has a focus on smart cities as well from a technology perspective. I'm the Operations Manager for Cultivate IT, which is the tech cluster for the Waikato. And I run events, of which one is around IoT. So IoT Waikato is the biggest tech event in the Waikato outside of Tech Week. Yeah, quite a lot.
Quite a lot going on in your space.
Yeah.
You talked about IoT. Let's start off with technology and IoT. Tell us about IoT in the context of the Waikato.
IoT London, which is quite a big actual meetup. Alex from there arrived in the Waikato probably 3 years ago, and that kicked off this interest in Internet of Things and actually building a community around that concept. But what did that mean for regional New Zealand? Mm-hmm. So it's the only meetup that happens in regional New Zealand that actually talks about technology from the perspective of everybody having access to it. So it's an event and an initiative that's open to the wider community. So schools go there. It's a connection with tech businesses, general businesses, councils, and the concept of Internet of Things for us is what does it mean for the Waikato? So actually the brief for the event is that as well. So what it's actually created is this opportunity for collaboration, and that's outside from just knowledge sharing. So what comes out of that often is a lot of tinkering, a lot of toying, a lot of playing around, but also that ability to resource something through relationships. And that's probably what was holding that movement of technology back, is you see the hype curve and you see that it's there, and then you sort of wonder, well, where is it around me? It was that investment in the ability to invest in the technology, but also to talk with people that wanted to try it as well, and then find out what sort of applications of that technology were relevant to us in regional New Zealand. Mm-hmm. So it's provided that connection, and it's great. We've connected it in with papers at university, like at tertiary level, and projects, and we've connected it in with the new digital technologies curriculum around schools, and we've connected it in with where the community wants to take technology in terms of waste minimisation, in terms of farming, in terms of that sort of small sort of backyard garden monitoring sort of technology, all the way to understanding that what's holding us back is the connectivity, and actually how do we look at what networks are available and actually make them work in the way that we want those devices to work. Mm-hmm.
How have you seen the community respond to IoT and technology in the context of smart in the Waikato?
I think that with this event, I talk about how it resonates with a wide audience, but really it's quite early days, like with that technology. And so with the digital technologies curriculum in schools, you are getting interest in emerging technologies from a teacher and a student perspective. Then you've got the tertiary, like the IoT initiatives at the university and at Wintec, and then you've got these events. But largely, the rest of the community has been waiting for something. Like waiting. They haven't realised they've been waiting for something, but there's been a miss there because everyone else hasn't been included in that conversation. And I think that's where the Smart Hamilton initiative is slotted in quite well, because the focus is around, really quickly, the focus was around society, not as a city. And if you think about what smart means for a city, when people talk about smart cities, they talk about technology, operational efficiency, technology connecting assets, enabling assets to speak, enabling assets to provide data so you can make better decisions about the application of those assets or the condition of that asset. So if you think about smart in the context of a society, it's actually thinking about how can we empower people to connect, how can we empower people to have a voice, and how can we be listening and provide a channel for that voice so that then we're actually reacting to what they have to say to actually improve how they're operating in terms of efficiency and what they need and where they're at, whereas other things in terms of their lifestyle, their education at. So that's how I think of it. So if I translate from what a smart city is to a smart society, it's those same enabling capabilities but actually at a human level, and that's what we're doing with technology being down the side as an enabler, for lack of a better word.
So one of the key pillars of the Smart Hamilton program is this interaction with community. And that, in my view, is integral to building that innovative ecosystem.
Yep.
How has that operationalized? I mean, who played a key role starting it off? Who's taking the mantle on?
Hamilton's the biggest city in the region, so, with 170,000 people. So when Hamilton City Council says they're doing smart cities and it's about the society, they're talking about the whole region in terms of that leadership role that they're playing. That's played really well in terms of their relationships and their operational approach to partnering. So Cultivate IT is the tech cluster for the region. Our job is to, as an organisation, is to connect, grow and provide a voice for the technology and innovation ecosystem to underpin economic development and community wellbeing. And that's really interesting for regional New Zealand. We're the only cluster of its kind in the country that does that from a true ecosystem perspective. And in the economic development strategy that the new EDA released last year, the portfolio of work was written by Cultivate IT and includes a Smart Towns and Regions component. So that ties in really nicely. So Smart Hamilton was happening over here. Cultivate IT is an organisation that's been around for about three or so years, in the pipeline for about 7. We're the fastest growing tech sector in the country, were for 2017, 2018 and still are in many respects. And And so what's happened is we've realised in order to move the region forward and actually also to influence other parts of regional New Zealand, we needed to come up with a program of work that resonated with that wide audience. So it covers the digital divide, skills and capacity, small businesses, tech innovation and smart towns and regions. And we're leveraging the relationship with Hamilton City Council to use their whole focus on being a leader for the region. So there's 8 or 9 other councils in this region, FYI. So Hamilton City Council plays a really big role in that respect, and partners with Cultivate IT on how do we engage other councils in a model that works for regional New Zealand. And then because Cultivate IT's program of work touches on all those other elements, it brings in small business, it brings in education, and it brings in the wider community. So that's that sort of level of so really you can't say who started it. It's more about how smart as a region we've been to connect in what's already happening with something that we know we need to do. But hey, we're not Tokyo, we're not Singapore, we're not Adelaide, we're not Melbourne. We're Hamilton. This is Waikato. This is New Zealand. Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple of international cities, obviously, who play a big part in their context of smart.
Yeah.
Does Hamilton benchmark itself against some of these international cities?
I think with the Smart Cities Council Australia New Zealand approach, so we are on a number of calls on a regular basis to councils within the country, but also across Australia and New Zealand. And yes, there's a lot of sharing of knowledge, and there's a Smart Cities Week that happens once a year, and so we have quite a good contingent from New Zealand Go. I wouldn't say benchmarking, but we're definitely learning from each other, and it avoids us reinventing wheels. But it also means that we can, the next step in the evolution of that is how can we actually collectively have a voice and influence. So benchmarking, I guess, in the sense that here in New Zealand, I think we're benchmarking from the perspective of the impact that we're making. So I think the benchmark really for any smart society is what impact are you making and to whom, and that's different for every city. So there's different priorities. Christchurch's priorities are different to Wellington. Auckland's huge, 2 million people compared to 170. Our priority is that regional voice, that regional connection, that whole working in with other things that are happening, so that we're actually truly uplifting the Waikato as Waikato Inc. That's a different focus. I mean, I know Napier's doing things, New Plymouth's doing things. So benchmarking in the sense of what outcome are we making that's important for us.
Are you able to share with us any early successes or success stories or case studies, or even case studies where things have not gone as planned?
To the blowing up one. So the connectivity thing is the issue. Smart Cities Council just wrapped up 2019 for Australia and New Zealand, and it was identified that the challenge was being able to replicate and scale. So we see that in the Waikato. We've had examples of the ability to sort of see the application of a technology in a certain situation, understand its potential, have seen its potential elsewhere as well. But when you look at the Waikato and it's flat and it's sparse and the mountains and other things that are sort of make up our landscape, you cannot replicate and scale that same solution here. And so we're actually working with telecommunications providers to sort of say, hey, look, an hour or so out of Hamilton, the phone doesn't even work, let alone a gateway that's meant to be communicating data across probably not Cat M1, but more of a LoRaWAN or an LPWAN network. So the failure has been in the connectivity, and I think the other failure has been in attempts to deploy technology without a conversation with who it really resonates with. Because IoT Waikato started in 2017. So some of the early sort of sessions or conversations that came out of that and attempts to deploy technology, and even outside of IoT Waikato, I'm not saying that IoT Waikato or HCC are the only ones doing anything with Internet of Things technology. I mean, Holter does stuff with cows and collars, and they're practicing on farms in the Waikato, but it's that ability to scale. And part of that conversation is connectivity, and the other one is not having the right people at the table. Some of it is that deployment. Yeah.
So you see the role of the council and the other participating organisations as a one to enable the conversation more as opposed to taking a lead role in any of these initiatives.
Yeah, and it truly is. And we've seen, in just conversations with the right people where you could say that the council is truly helping things progress at a faster pace than they would have without Smart Hamilton, because the approach that they're taking is you're doing what you're doing, we're doing what we're doing, but actually together we can support each other. And we're seeing that in terms of smart homes, we're seeing that in the health space, we're seeing that in accessibility, so the ability to partner almost and still leave those organisations to be the lead in their specific whatever community it might be, but be part of a bigger conversation. Yeah.
Can you give us an insight into the citizen's perspective of Smart Hamilton, and how does the citizen and the community broadly looks to engage or is engaged with the Smart Hamilton program or the broader initiatives around creating a smart society?
So the smart space is not in an innovation village or a community. The smart space, you don't have to book a tour to visit the smart space. The smart space was designed to be at the Central Library in the CBD of Hamilton so that anyone can walk in. And yes, it's got a timetable in terms of when it's open, but it doesn't have a booking system where you actually have to, like in other parts of, when we had a look at sort of what we were doing with the smart space, we looked at other examples from around the world and how they worked and where they were located. So that's one key way. Like I've been in that space and I've seen just people walking off the street. I've had a man that walked in from the library itself and saw me and another person in the space and had a load of books with him and had sort of of a couple of moments to talk while he waited for his ride. The conversation, which is really interesting, was that through his life, he's a retired person, he had seen the evolution of technology from different elements, from no TV to TV, moving from radio and then phone, from dial to, and it was this great conversation about how we need to make sure people are, and he sort of acknowledged the fact, didn't know it was here, we'll be telling people about it, the space. We've seen people, youth, hanging around in the CBD, skateboarding, the scooters, the Lime scooters, and taken an interest in what this space is because it's cool in there, or potentially there's water, there's water to drink, but walk out sort of with a sense of, we engaged them, one of them I remember around data for the scooters, and that ability for them to see how does that connect, that make that connection to say, there's a scooter, I use an app for that, but actually what happens with that data? And that's the key thing, is to take everybody with us with technology, not as a user, as an understander of the potential of technology, because only then can you truly co-create.
Yes. So where to from here over the next 5 to 7 years with Smart Hamilton?
We're like, a year and a half, I think, a couple of years into this. So the program of work that the Smart Towns and Regions initiative sits in is part of the Digital Waikato 2025 strategy. So that's quite ideal the next 5 years. So we've got a conversation going at the moment in terms of the wider Waikato innovation ecosystem. So Hamilton City Council, Cultivate IT and Te Waka are getting pretty much everybody that's involved in the innovation ecosystem in Waikato in a room. We've had them in there twice. And we're talking about how can we collaborate more. So I think the next 5 years is going to see some alignment between existing innovation initiatives, where Smart fits into that in terms of Smart Hamilton, but Smart in terms of Smart Towns and Regions. And a big part of that conversation is accessibility for all. And that's resonating through the Design Factory. It's resonating through things that WinTech's doing. It's in terms of that connection with schools, the connection with wider organisations through events and initiatives. So the challenge for us is, and I talked about this recently somewhere, is not connecting in parts of the ecosystem, is ensuring that everybody is part of it. And that's what I'd like to see in terms of Smart Hamilton. And I think the approach is there. And now we just need to have that wider conversation, continue to have that wider conversation and buy-in, and show through what we've been able to deliver that this is what's possible, which will actually increase the buy-in.
Thanks for sharing your insights with us, Jonathan McBool, the Smart City Advisor to the Hamilton City Council.
Great, thank you for your time.
Thank you.